Hey everybody, this is Dark Girls and we're back with another video. Now before I go into what we're going to actually be working on here, I went ahead and redid the the bottom line of the recording. Now most of you probably don't pay attention to that, and pretty much the only people that have noticed there's just been a song down there. But I decided it was about time to kind of clean it up just a little bit and put a much better time and date format down there. Now what I have been doing for the longest time has been just implementing a simple kind of text color box to block out the taskbar so you don't really see the windows I have open. That way it looks a little nicer and cleaner. But what I was still kind of doing was making sure that the box was clipped over just a little bit so that way the date and system time was showing. Now instead of doing that, because it kind of, even though it worked, it didn't look really good and it didn't match the text format. So I went ahead and did is I downloaded a program called Snaz here, and it should be now handling my date and time format. Not sure if I'll stick with this program in particular. It seems to do the job, but it works, and we'll go ahead and use that for a while, and you guys can give your opinion if you like it or you want the format to be changed in whatsoever. Now because I am in the US, I don't know if all you are in the same place, I am going to do my date, no matter what you guys say, is always going to be month, day, year. I don't care who argues that, it's going to be the same way. The clock right now is in 24-hour format. Not sure if we'll stick with that. I did put the time zone so that way you guys know exactly when I'm recording these, even though regardless if I upload them a day or two later. Anyways, let's move on. Now what we're going to do in this episode here is we're going to build a battery box. At least we're going to get to the start of it. I'll break these up into segments just like I always do when we start doing this. Now, the reason we're building a battery box is that ICBM Classic needs some kind of way to store energy internally in the mod that we end up producing from the generator later. We'll do a separate episode on the generator if I have time, or we'll see how things go. Now we already have the battery done, and it works. We can go in game and confirm that it actually does charge up by other mods. It's good enough. I do need to do some minor tweaks to make sure the information updates quickly and everything else is pretty smooth, but functionality wise it's there, it's done. So what we're going to actually do for this battery box is we're not going to actually implement a conventional battery box. I might do an episode on this later where we implement the standard like IC2 or thermal expansion battery box where you simply charge up energy in the box and you're done. What we're going to do instead is we're going to build something pretty much equivalent to a charging stand, but instead of it having separate slots for charging and discharging, those slots are going to be used for the same exact thing. So the code would look almost identical for the actual system when it comes to the difference between a normal battery box and what we're making. The only major change is what we're going to end up with is a function that checks all the items and drains the power out of the items or puts them into the items. So let's go ahead and get started. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to want to figure out some kind of design. This is like the first step ever. Actually, I don't think I've ever covered the steps. When it comes to actually working in a mod, and there's multiple ways to do this, there's not a perfect way, but the general way I tend to do it when I'm working on this is the method at least I attempt to force myself into. I'm not always good about this. Is I start with the design, then I do code, then I do documentation, and then there's usually like testing. Now, the reason why I've actually added this stuff is most people probably know is these are the only two steps I really even care about for most of the part. There's now two more steps I usually actually work with this now, is that I try to make sure after I've coded it, I document everything so I know how everything works, and then I finally test it. Testing usually also comes during coding. What we really mean by testing is going through and making sure everything's done before we push it out to live and actually get it released, because step 5 would be release at this point. Now with this is also add to this is there's actually some sub-steps. We can go ahead and just represent these by doing like a letter A. In the design, you're going to want to figure out what your concept is. You're then going to want to figure out, you're going to do some research, and then you're actually going to want to write everything down and actually get everything written up. So this would be create the plan. We're not going to actually do all of this in this episode, because it really does depend on exactly what you're doing, which of these steps you actually do follow. If you're just making a really simple correction, code is about the only thing you want to really care about, because the design is a little over the top if you're just doing something simple. Even in the case of the battery here, the only thing that I really got to in the design step was concept. I go, okay, yeah, I wanted a battery, and then in my head I went, okay, I know what texture I want, I know how would I want to work and everything else. I didn't have to do research because I've already done the research in the past. I didn't have to create a plan because I've already done it as well. Now, if you've ever actually made something, of course you're going to follow the same step because you won't have to do research or really planning because you've already made the content before. So the only thing you really want is a concept. For our exact case, is the concept we're going to end up with is a battery box. And we want that battery box to be able to charge and discharge items, and then use items as power storage. So that's our concept. Now research, what we could do in this regard if we really wanted to go through this step exactly how I have it set up here, is we would go maybe talk to a couple of developers, you would talk to devs, you would look at code, look at mod examples, just kind of fill out the current environment for the game. As the whole idea behind research is to figure out what you can make and what works. Given this is not always going to result in good data, so you may go do research, you may decide, hey, I want to make a dinosaur, and there may only be like one mod in existence that actually does that, so you're not going to maybe get good research with that. But what you could do is funnel this down to, well, let's look at mods that add entities, let's look at mods that add aggressive entities, large entities, stuff like that. So research can be done in various ways on that regard, and the whole ideal is you just kind of exactly how you want to figure out what you can do, what has been done, and really just give yourself a little bit of data to fall back on while you're creating your plan. Because creating the plan is, in this regard, is we're going to make a block, make a tile entity, implement capabilities, wrapper capabilities to items, and then build GUIs and stuff. So the plan isn't really complicated, and I'll probably show this off a little bit better with a little doodle and something else. So this is kind of what we'll do in the design phase, and then the code phase, you're just going to make stuff. Documentation phase, write down what you made. It's not very hard. Testing, test what you made, so not hit cap lock in this case. And then release, upload a file. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. I'll probably cover this more in detail in another video of where we go down into really deep detail of exactly what would comprise of all this, because of course in this stage we would also have like things like uploading code, and we would have like JUnit testing, so like unit testing, etc, etc. So it'd be a lot of substeps in each one of these, and it would definitely be enough time for another video. So with our actual design, what we're actually going to end up making, and we'll do this, yeah, we'll just do this with Paint because I don't really care enough to actually have a document online. So we're going to make a GUI. That GUI is going to have slots in it. It's going to have an inventory, it's going to have some kind of power gauge in it. We'll probably not get into the power gauge in any of these videos just simply because it'll take me a while to toy with. But we'll have some kind of regard to that, so power gauge, have some kind of system in that, and it may be divided up by bars, so you have some kind of indication. I'm not going to draw the bars, I'm too bad at that when it comes to that regard. But we'll have things like batteries in here, so we may be able to store like different batteries, and we want to make sure it also supports different mods as well. So these could be quite literally anything that you want to actually have. So you have the batteries, and this is all going to be represented inside of a block. This block, we're going to keep it pretty simple, so what we'll do is we'll just make it look like a little cabinet. Probably the easiest texture to do. We'll probably change the texture here later. Nothing, when you make a plan, by the way, don't feel like it's a bad thing to change your design at the last moment. If you're working on something, you go, well, this doesn't really work out, feel free to change it. Go ahead and do something like this just to kind of indicate that this flows down into the block. So this will be our GUI. Let me go ahead and change the text color. GUI. This will be our block. And what we'll end up with is we'll end up with a tile class. We'll end up with probably a capability wrapper, and then an inventory handler. That's what I think we'll end up with. We'll probably end up figuring out we need a bit more, so we'll have different things attached to that. And this is really what the design ends up being, because it's not too complicated. Because what's going to happen is the inventory handler is going to basically relay to the GUI what items we have. The actual tile entity is going to store everything. So it's going to store our inventory, going to store our items, it's going to store basically what data we need to make sure everything works. And the capability wrapper is just going to make sure that anytime something calls to go how much energy you have, add energy, remove energy, that then it goes and accesses all of the actual batteries and then handles all that code. So this way this machine will work with any other system that supports the Forge Energy system, and we won't have to add really special handling to make sure everything works. Inside of the actual tile as well, we're probably going to end up with some kind of method to output power, because we're going to have to output power. We won't need anything for input power, that's going to be handled by us automatically, but we'll need a method for that. And then we'll need probably, in the capability, we'll probably need a couple methods to calculate power, and then actually do all the iteration to input power, output power. That shouldn't be too hard to implement. We'll probably just do a simple for loop for that. We'll keep it as basic as possible. But that's the design, not too complicated. A lot of people overthink this, is you just want to build something really, really simple. Now, if we were doing a very standard vanilla-esque like power box, really what you end up doing is probably just cutting out this extra handling for wrapping the capabilities, and instead you would just have a basic power capability system that then would just store your energy inside of the capability. So you would have basically that, and this would store your energy. And then you maybe have a method, if you wanted to keep the inventory, you would have a couple methods to pull power from the items and then put power back in the items from the battery box. And of course you would still have slots up here in order to drain and recharge items if you wanted to have that. If you didn't want to have that, you would just simply remove that functionality off there, remove that off there, and you're good to go. Pretty straightforward design, and I'll go ahead and leave you here, and I'll be back with the next video showing how the code actually does work.